Hey, it's Rebecca. I'm the founder of Hike Like a Woman, and today we are talking about how to clean and store your camping gear. If you're like me, sometimes you come home from a camping trip or a backpacking trip, and you just throw all your gear in a closet or up in your attic, and you just want to forget about it. But you shouldn't do that because it's not good for your gear. And today we're going to talk about that. Here at Hike Like a Woman, I believe that hiking, camping, backpacking, outdoor adventures should be simple and they should be easy, because if it's difficult and time consuming and complicated, we're just not going to do it. So today I'm going to just share with you some of my tips, tricks, and hacks for cleaning and storing your camping gear. Here's what's on the agenda. Today we're going to talk about tents, backpacks, sleeping bags and sleeping pads. Words are so hard. And then we're going to talk about your camp kitchen. So stoves, fuel, water filters, hydration bladders, all of those things. Here's why this is important. If you're like me, you have spent a lot of money on camping and backpacking gear. So let's say your backpack costs $250. Let's say your tent costs $300. Maybe your sleeping bag costs $200, your sleeping pad $100, your stove $125, water filter $75. I mean, before you look at it, you've already spent $1,000 just on basic camping gear. And that doesn't include food. That doesn't include your clothing. That doesn't include your first aid kit. That doesn't include your navigation tools, all those things. It is very easy to drop a lot of coin on camping and backpacking gear. And I will say that some of the best gear in my closet is gear that I've had for over a decade, but it's gear that I also spend a lot of time maintaining so that it can last a long time. So I want you to protect your investment by taking care of your gear. And we're going to talk about that. I want you to protect your investment by having systems and processes in place so that you can clean and maintain your gear. Why is this important? I mentioned before that I'm a bit of a lazy hiker and camper and backpacker, and I just like to throw all the things in the closet and forget about them. But a few years ago, my family had planned a camping trip. And actually, we were taking our kids backpacking for the first time. And so I was pulling all of our gear out, and I pulled out our tent and I looked at our backpacking tent, and there was mold all over the fly. So we're 12 hours out from getting ready for this trip, and the fly of our tent is completely molded and disgusting. So there I am in the bathroom, trying to clean the fly and get all the mold off of it so we could go backpacking. And then I'm like, oh great, now I'm gonna have a wet fly that I'm gonna have to carry tomorrow. It was just ugly, and it just wasn't very fun. And so I was like, okay, Rebecca, you need some pretty good you need to develop some systems so that this doesn't happen again, because it's a total waste of time. End of story. Yeah, we got it all figured out. It was fine, but I was not happy because had I come home from my previous backpacking trip and just laid the fly across my deck and let it dry, I wouldn't have had to waste so much time scrubbing mold off of a tent fly. So let's talk a little bit about tents and um, how to clean and maintain your tent. So here at Hike Like a Woman, we have a rather large fleet of rental tents because we do guide trips. And so we go through this process at the end of every trip now, and my family does at the end of every family trip, to maintain our tents. So the first thing to do is to set up your tent if you live in an area where you can. And if you can't set it up, just to lay it all out. And then I like to do an inventory. So I like to make sure that I have my fly, my tent. I like to make sure that my guy lines are still good, that I have my stakes, that all the poles work correctly. So lay it out, do a really good inventory. And then I like to clean my tent and fix anything that may be broken. I will say that it's important to always follow the manufacturer guidelines when you're cleaning your tent. This is what I do with all of my tents. The very first step that I mentioned before is to set the tent up. And I usually just like to set the tent up in my backyard. And I check the footprint or the ground sheet. I check the tent poles. I check the tent itself. I check the stakes, and I check the fly. And what I like to do is set up the tent and then check all the zippers. So I will physically open and close all of the zippers. I will check to make sure that there's not holes in anything, any holes in the mesh, any holes in the fly or the tent itself. I will check to make sure that water beads off the fly so that the fly is not going to just be soaking up water, but that it still has that water resistant capability. I'll check my tent poles to make sure that the shock cord, that stretchy cord inside the poles, isn't loose or broken. And I'll check the seams of my tent and the fly. I like to shake the tent out, and then I like to vacuum it with a hand vacuum. After I'm done vacuuming or sweeping out the tent, then I like to spot clean any dirty parts or stains or take off any mud. Um, I just use unscented Dr. Bronner's, but some people might get like a specific tent cleaner. I just find that kind of to be a waste of money, and I usually have unscented Dr. Bronner's from the trip anyway. So I just take a little bit of that soap with a washcloth and some warm water and spot clean any dirty parts of the tent. And if there's something really filthy, then I'll hose it down and let it dry outside for a few days in the shade if you can find it. I'll also clean a tent in a bathtub if I need to, but I just would prefer to wash the tent outdoors if that's possible. Once the tent is clean and dry, then the next step is to fix any problems that I discovered when I was kind of doing the inventory of it. So if the zippers are sticky, I might use some lube on the zippers so they're glide smoothly, right? If there's any holes, I can sew those up or use something like tenacious tape that I love to fix those holes. I'll seal any seams that might need a sealing. And then if the fly is not showing that water resistance, I will go ahead and spray it with some DWR. So that stands for durable water repellent. It's what's in like rain flies and rain jackets, all the things. So I could treat it and then let it dry all the way. With tents, moisture is the enemy, and we need to make sure that they're always being stored completely dry. And once the tent is completely dry after I've cleaned it, you can fold it or you can stuff it and store it in a bag, the bag that it came in, or store it in a bin. Some people think that stuffing is better because if you fold the tent the same way over and over again, it's going to start to develop some seams, and it could start to create those seams and kind of break down in those areas where the folds happen. I'm a stuffer, but I know that some people are super OCD, and the thought of like stuffing a tent into the bag is terrifying. So roll it, fold it, stuff it, whatever floats your boat here. I like to store tents in a cool, dry place. Places like attics, garages, like the rocket box on the top of your car, in your RV. Sometimes those places can have pretty extreme heat fluctuations. And so gear is likes a nice, comfortable 70 degrees in a cool, dry climate. So maybe in a closet under your bed. That is how to maintain your tent. If you're joining me for this workshop, it does come with a downloadable PDF guide. So this workshop is meant to go in conjunction with that PDF guide. So go ahead and download that guide. The next thing that I want to talk about maintaining is your backpack. So your backpack, your rain cover, that backpack that you love so much, it needs a little bit of love too. So when I come home from a trip, the first thing that I like to do is empty everything out of my backpack, shake it out. Then I use a little vacuum and vacuum it out. And then I like to check all of the things, right? All of the straps, all of the buckles, all the zippers, all the pouches, because the next time that I go on a trip, I want to make sure that that backpack is going to be functioning and fully functional, because I don't want to like get ready for a trip and get out my backpack and then realize that I have a broken zipper. That's no fun. So check it all at the end of your trip. And then you can spot clean any places with that same solution that you used for your tent. So a little bit of unscented Dr. Bronner's or some gear cleaning stuff and some warm water. And then if it's really dirty, once again, you can hose it down outside. I like to let my backpack dry in my garage actually and get it out of the sun and it can just dry there. If your pack is exposed to direct sunlight, the UV will actually damage the material over time. So I like to dry it in the shade. And then, if it's really filthy, throw it in the bathtub, hang it to dry, whatever you got to do. It's important to never put your backpack into a washing machine. It just makes things awkward. And so it's better just to, give it a little scrub and then hang it up to dry. After my backpack is dry, then I like to fix any problems that I have. So that's where that zipper lube comes in. Sew any holes, fix anything up with some tenacious tape, replace any buckles. I have found that the buckles are always the thing to break. They are always the weakest part of any backpack. I've had to replace a ton of buckles. Osprey buckles are more durable than Deuter buckles. So if you have a Deuter pack, like just go ahead and buy yourself some replacement buckles because they're going to break. And then if you have a rain cover for your backpack, some people hate them. Some people love them. Whatever, I could take it or just use garbage bags. But it's important to check the rain cover of your pack too and make sure that's good to go and see if it needs any more DWR treatment there. So that is how to maintain your backpack. Next up is our sleep systems. So we'll talk about sleeping bags first, and then we'll talk about sleeping pads. So what I like to do with sleeping bags is when I come home from a trip, I'll just go ahead and lay out my sleeping bag outside. So I'll lay it out on the yard, I'll throw it over the railings of our deck, and then I'll inspect the inside of the bag and the outside of the bag and check for any grime or grossness, see if it needs to be washed. I don't wash my sleeping bag until it gets pretty filthy. You can get a lot of uses out of your sleeping bag without having to wash it as long as you take some care to air it out after each trip. So if the sleeping bag's I'll check it out, and then if it's kind of smelly, I'll leave it outside for the whole day and see if that helps. And then we'll go from there. The places where my sleeping bags tend to be the grodiest are around my feet and then my neck area and my face. And I think that's probably just because, your feet just get all those oils and grime, especially if you're just walking around camp in some sandals after your long day of hiking, and our faces are, got sunscreen and lotion and bug spray and all the things. So especially check like the head and neck area of your sleeping bag and the foot area. So once I've laid out my sleeping bag, I check the zippers, I check everything for holes, and make sure everything is good to go. And then if it needs to be washed, then I'll go ahead and throw it in the washing machine. So with down sleeping bags, I think it's important to get a specific down wash for those bags. Dr. Bronner's, or sorry, not Dr. Bronner's, Nick Wax makes a great down wash. And if you have a synthetic sleeping bag, then Dr. Bronner's is fine. You don't need a special laundry detergent for your synthetic sleeping bag. Just make sure that it's not scented. We don't want anything with the scent. We do not want our camping gear to smell good. We just want it to smell natural. It's good to use a front-loading washing machine with your sleeping bags. Sometimes we'll go to the laundromat if we are trying to do like everybody's sleeping bags and the whole family at once. If you go to a laundromat, there's a few things to be careful of. First of all, not every washing machine and dryer at a laundromat has consistent temperature. So we've actually ruined several sleeping bags, probably 2 sleeping bags in our rental fleet, because the temperature was not consistent at the laundromat. And also, sometimes if you're the laundromat, like the machines are not necessarily super clean. So if you can wash your gear at home, that's great. If not, you can schlep it to a laundromat and that's just fine too. But to wash the sleeping bag itself, I like to unzip it and then I like to turn it inside out to protect the outside of the sleeping bag because that material is a little more delicate than the inside. Unzip that bag, flip it inside out, throw it in the washer with whatever detergent you're using. When it comes to drying your sleeping bag, you can throw it in the gentle cycle of your dryer. I like to dry a sleeping bag in the mesh bag that it comes with. A lot of sleeping bags come with mesh bags if you can. And then you can throw a wool dryer ball in with your sleeping bag, especially if it's down. A lot of people will say to put a tennis ball in there, but that actually degrades the down over time. So if you want a little more longevity out of your sleeping bag, just use one of those wool dryer balls. And then once the sleeping bag comes out of the dryer, once it's clean and dry, what I like to do is take a second to fix any problems. So zipper lube if I need it, some holes, if tenacious tape, so any holes, putting any tenacious tape on those holes. Moisture is the enemy once again. And we want to make sure that sleeping bag is completely dry before you store it. So the goal with storing your sleeping bag is to make sure that you're not compressing the insulation. So this means it's good to store your sleeping bag in the mesh bag that it comes with. You can store it in a bin. You can hang it up in your closet. You can just leave it under your bed. I also think it's important to unpack or move your sleeping bag around every couple of months so that it doesn't get any folds in it. And if you have a synthetic sleeping bag, I would just treat it like a down sleeping bag. Don't store it in the stuff sack that it comes with, and don't roll and fold it, because if you do that the same time every time, you're going to split those synthetic fibers, and then you're going to have cold spots in your sleeping bag, and that's a drag, and nobody wants that. Just keep that sleeping bag stored in a cool, dry place, a closet under your bed, wherever you have space. And then let's look at your sleeping pad. So as you're going through and inspecting your sleeping bag and cleaning that, go ahead and inspect your sleeping pad too. If it's an inflatable sleeping pad, what I like to do is inflate it fully and then leave it overnight. And what you could do is you could put some books on it or a little bit of weight and see if it deflates, or you could sleep on it and just make sure that it still is inflated in the morning. If it does have a leak in it, then you can check for leaks. And I like to just check for leaks. If you can't hear the leak, then sometimes you can stick your sleeping pad in some water and squeeze it around and see where the air bubbles are, because that usually indicates a leak. Sleeping pads, inflatable sleeping pads tend to get leaks around the seams. So double check those seams. And then if you need to wipe it off, clean your sleeping pad, I just use the gentle cleaner. That Dr. Bronner's is great. When it comes time to store your sleeping pad, it's good to store it flat and with the valve open. If it's a self-inflating sleeping pad, then that's not going to work because it will just fill with air. But if you can store it flat and with the valve open, that's ideal. So under the bed, perfect place to store it. All right, this moves into cook systems. Let's talk about stoves first. So first of all, when you look at your stoves here, we want to make sure they're nice and clean. Like, I don't want to eat noodles from last year's trip. Just make sure all the pots are clean. And then if you have a canister stove, so like a Jetboil, you want to make sure that built-in lighter, if it has a self-igniting lighter, make sure that is still functional. Sometimes you can replace that piezo. It's called a piezo lighter. Sometimes you can replace that or remove that. And it's good to store it removed if you can. Make sure that there's not any fuel attached to your stove. I don't know why you would do that anyway, but just check that fuel canister. You don't want it attached to your stove. And keep that in a cool place away from any open flames. And then dry your stove and any cookware and clean it and make sure it's good to go. With water filters, it's really important to follow manufacturer's instructions for those. But, I like to flush clean water through the filter and disassemble any parts and make sure those are all cleaned out. One water filter trick that I have is to grab the irrigation syringe from your first aid kit. A lot of times first aid kits come with a little syringe that you can use to irrigate a wound. And you can usually squeeze some water through that syringe and get all the gunk out of your water filter. So it's nice and clean and happy. And then if you find that as you're cleaning your water filter, it's just a little funky, you can just dilute a teeny little bit of bleach and clean out the water filter with a little bit of bleach. And then you can use a toothbrush or an irrigation syringe to get any grime or silt out of your water filter. And then making sure that that is all clean and all dry before you pack it away. With hydration bladders, they tend to get pretty funky pretty easily, and I actually hate them, but a lot of people love them. Actually store hydration bladders in our freezer, and I found that that just prevents funk. Hydration bladders are really difficult to dry, so yeah, I just store them in my freezer, and it works like a charm. And then as far as like bare canisters, bare bags, I just like to wipe everything out with a warm washcloth and just make sure that everything is clean. The next thing to think about, and this is not a Cook system, but just a Rebecca Walsh extra, is anything with batteries. So like your GPS, your headlamps, whatever, just remove those batteries before you store it. And that's good because then you won't have any batteries leaking and corroding and ruining your systems. And then you'll have fresh batteries the next time you use them. So just remove the batteries. And then your first aid kit. So just doing a quick double check of your first aid kit to make sure everything is good to go for the next trip. And we also have a workshop about first aid kits. So if you're wondering about how to inventory, maintain, and figure out what to put in your first aid kit, be sure to go check out our workshop all about first aid kits. All right. So that is our down and dirty on cleaning, storing, and maintaining your camping and backpacking gear. If you want to learn more about what we do over at Hike Like a Woman, we lead amazing adventures, in-person adventures. So if you've always wanted to go on like a bucket list trip, then you need to check out our adventures tab. So just head to our website, hikelikeawoman.com. There's an adventures tab, and you can see our current trip offerings. We offer 4 trips a year, and they always sell out. So go check out our adventures. We also have a section there for resources and courses. In that section, you're going to find links to all of our free workshops, just like this one. So if you like this workshop and you want to learn more about other topics, you can go check out our resources and then our online courses. We teach a bunch of online courses where we really dive deep into certain topics. So go check out our resources and courses if you want to keep learning, because outdoor education is fun and because it's important, and it'll keep you safe and help you be confident if you know some of these skills. So my job is to help teach those skills. We also do that through our Q&A Friday, and every Friday we have a podcast and a YouTube show where I answer community questions all about everything from hiking, backpacking, camping, adventure travel, all of the things. So you can go check out our Q&A Friday library. And if you have a question that you would like me to answer on Q&A Fridays, or if there's a topic that you want me to talk more about here that we just barely mentioned during this workshop, head over to our website, hikelikeawoman.com, and click our Ask Me Anything tab. And I will answer your question on Q&A Friday. So that's all I have for today. Thanks so much. Go check out our other resources and courses. And I hope to see you soon on a Hike Like a Woman adventure.